Hey everyone, I'm Mike Howell with the Oversight Project, here with my colleague Jeff Clark and our friend Jeff Parker. For those of you who've been following the Oversight Project, you know we hate people getting screwed, and we find it pretty much everywhere. A lot of our work focused on, the weaponization of government against Trump supporters through the Department of Justice and the president himself. The deeper you go into the way our law operates in the United States, such that it is even law, we're really finding a systems level critique. It applies everywhere. It's not just the looting you see in Minneapolis, the fraud you see running rampant in Congress throughout the government. It's the way the rich get richer and abuse the system and get away with everything. Democrats and Republicans largely both have that critique right, at least in their voting bases. The system's rigged. It's rigged against you. It's rigged against everyone who can't afford a big corporate lobbyist to get them in front of the administration at any given time or a various state government or U.S. attorney's office. It's two sets of rules, and that's not okay. And our friend Jeff Parker has an interesting story about that. One that, frankly, I never even thought about occurring in this type of space. Shocked to learn it. And I want you to hear about it too. Jeff, who are you?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. Who am I? Well, I thought I was just a businessman who loved innovation and wanted to grow new products in the United States because this is the American dream. And frankly, I've had the good fortune of experiencing the American dream, but unfortunately, I've also recently had the unfortunate experience of experiencing the American nightmare. And I'm going to tell you, at least if through my story, which I don't think is unique. I know plenty of other people who've gone through what you're going to hear here. Unfortunately for them, they've not been able to keep their businesses alive. I've had very good fortune of investors who believe, who understand that what we invented changed the wireless world, that everybody's using the inventions that we brought to market. But unfortunately, they're using them not because we are being compensated for it, but because they've been stolen by big behemoth tech companies who think it's totally okay to take other people's inventions that are protected by American patents. I mean, patents that this was a notion in the law that was conceived by the original founders of our country. It's in the original Constitution, not even an amendment. It was there to prevent exactly what we're suffering from today. If you go back and look at why do we have a patent system, quote, to avoid a country of kings and queens, to give common, ordinary people an opportunity to use their minds and their hard work to innovate and to help the United States become the country that it is today, but that I think has probably never been more challenged. And what's really crazy about our story, I'll give you a little spoiler alert to hopefully keep you here for long enough to hear the whole story. Where is our invention today being produced? China. How did it get to China? I didn't take it to China. I can tell you who took it to China. The guys who stole it from us took it to China. And you know why they took it there, Mike? Simple money. Very short-sighted. And now those very people who took it to China are losing their market share left and right. It's a really it's shocking. And let me tell you, the company we're up against, the biggest situation we have to deal with, is a very protected company. You ask me who I am. So I had the good fortune of being a guy who got involved in semiconductors very early back in the 1980s and brought the very first chips to market for heating air conditioning controls. Those digital thermostats on your wall today started with our company back in 1980. We caught the attention of a company called Carrier Corporation, became a partner of theirs, and together we brought microelectronics throughout the industry and sold that company to their parent in about 1990. Formed another company, and we brought television studio automation. Probably half the country's television newsrooms are based on the technology we developed, reduced the staff, increased the profits, made the news look better.
You should do ours.
I can
We could
help.
use a little help.
I
This
can,
is
I can,
our
I
Rough
can,
Shot podcast.
I can help with that. I've been out of that business for a few years, but I could help with that. And then ultimately, through that company, we had the good fortune of developing a new wireless technology because we used some wireless in our products. And it was when we developed that, which was in the mid 90s, that we thought, oh my goodness, this may be the biggest invention we'll ever touch. Back in that time frame, you might remember the Nokia candy bar phone that we all walked around with. Texas Instruments was making their chips. It was a whole different era. But there was a small company called Qualcomm that had an idea how to take the cell phone system and connect it to the internet. But that was really hard. And it was, this is back when we were text messaging was about as far as we were going with data on phones. The problem with that new Qualcomm idea was that the phones weren't going to be the size of a candy bar. They're going to be the size of a small shoebox. And the battery life wasn't going to last 2 or 3 hours. It was going to last like 20 minutes. And oh, by the way, the cost wasn't $1. It was like $3. So they had a big problem to figure out how to get these phones to be competitive. Well, at the time in the late 90s, we were working on a similar problem, but was for our television studio products. And we have a very bright engineer, an inventor, and he came up with this idea. And when I saw it, I thought, oh my goodness, this is revolutionary, because he figured out how to take all of these hundreds of components that's required to connect, let's say, your phone to a cell phone tower, from a box the size of a shoebox down to a tiny little computer chip half the size of your little fingernail. And when I saw that,
So Jeff, tell us about who this inventor is, because he, what I understand of his story is he's kind of every man with a big brain, which is the American dream.
he is the poster child for that, Jeff, no question. His name is David Sorrells. You can see his name is all over the patents. Wasn't able to get economically through college, so he had to go to work. But he's one of these guys who just sees a problem and has a very unique way at looking at solutions. And he saw this problem we had, which was to create a very tiny little wireless chip that could connect things wirelessly, and came at it from a whole different. We're going to put out a video soon that'll explain this, and it's going to be done in a way that I think pretty much anybody, you don't have to be an engineer to understand it, but his invention's genius. And it's genius because it's counter to the way the industry thought radio signals could be created and received and pull the data off. He did something that everybody in the industry said couldn't be done, and it'll be explained in this video.
Yeah, I know you're going to explain more, but just one quick point. From my understanding of it, it's contrary even to what the textbooks at the time said.
Yes.
Right? That's how innovative
Well, I'll tell you,
inventor is.
I'll tell you a great story. We ran some of our early chips at Texas Instruments, and Texas Instruments typically only runs chips for their own products. But every now and then, when they see a new technology, they'll let you use their fab. So we went to them and they said, well, we're not going to let you use our semiconductor fabs and we don't know what we're doing. So we got under a non-disclosure, and David Sorrells and one of our patent attorneys went in there to show their chief technology officer how this technology worked. And I got a phone call right after the meeting. And the guy who made the phone call from Texas Instruments says to me, Jeff, wow, you're lucky that David Sorrells is not a classically trained wireless engineer. I said, why is that? He said, we were all taught not to do what his technology does. He would have never even looked in that direction. So something, Albert Einstein said, it's amazing curiosity survives formal education. So maybe David Sorrells had the benefit of not going to college. I don't know, but he had a very smart idea and he saw it all the way through. And it wasn't like done in 2 minutes. It was years of experimentation, and it was tens of millions of dollars of laboratory equipment that allowed us to get through those. So this wasn't, unfortunately, two guys in the garage.
So Jeff, look, I'm someone who has the benefit of a classical education such as it is. And one of the things your saga brings to my mind is the Dickens novel Bleak House, and the fact that there's a lawsuit in it called Jarndyce v. Jarndyce that goes on and on and on. Your case sounds a lot to me like Jarndyce v. Jarndyce, except it's ParkerVision versus Qualcomm. Do you want to describe that?
I do. Thank you for asking. So look, we've been litigating this exact situation against Qualcomm going on 16 years. And I had a board member once in a company, and he said to me, very smart guy, he ran a very big technology company. He said, Jeff, if you put 20 engineers on a problem, and after a certain number of years they can't solve the problem, it's probably not an engineering problem. Okay. And I think there's an analogy here. If you're litigating a case for 16 years and you still don't have a resolution, maybe it's not a legal issue. So we file a case against Qualcomm 16 years ago. How do we, first of all, come to find that they're using our technology? Well, the history goes back even beyond that. It goes back to the year 2000, 26 years ago, when we have our first little chips that has this technology, and we can demonstrate it. This isn't just that David has an idea. He's got a product. And we get an entry into Qualcomm and we show them the chip. And they look at that and they go, how are you doing that? And they take it into a laboratory and they test it and they go, how are you doing that? And so our patent attorney says, look, to show them this, it's going to be covered by patents, but let's get them under a very special non-disclosure. They don't just sign for the corporation. Each engineer, and we limit it to just a few engineers, has to personally sign these non-disclosures, which they didn't like, but they did it. Anyway, they tested it. They loved it. They wanted to get a license to use it in their own chips because they saw it was going to level the playing field for their idea. And unfortunately, every time we'd come to some kind of an agreement, they'd change the agreement. So after about a year of this, I mean, I had done various deals with large companies, and I said, this doesn't feel right. These guys don't feel trustworthy. We're not going to do a deal with them. So we go our separate ways. 5 years later, they come out with a whole new set of chips for smartphones, the first smartphones. And these are killers, low power consumption, high performance, amazing features. And at the time, they're only like a 20-25% market share company. And I start thinking, oh my gosh, how are they doing the wireless connectivity in those chips? Is it our technology? Unfortunately, hard to know, because our technology is a circuit technology that's buried inside of a chip with a lot of other circuits. Not easy, if even possible, to find. Well, from that introduction in the mid-2000s, their market share goes 20%, 40%, 60%, 90%. Everybody in the industry is screaming, they're a monopoly, stop, stop. And there's all kinds of lawsuits flying against them for monopolistic behavior and blah, blah, blah. But around the year 2010, they publish a paper bragging about a new 3G chip and how they were able to get the whole thing on one die. And right in that conference paper that some of those engineers published, what I doubt senior management knew, is a description of the radio connectivity and our technology. And it's right there in black and white. It's not my opinion. So we
How
talked.
did you feel when you saw that after you saw the paper?
Actually, Jeff, it answered some questions, because about a year or two before we found that paper, we started actually getting phone calls from weird anonymous sources asking if we would be wanting to sell our patent portfolio. And I would say, probably not, but who wants to buy it? Click. And I started thinking, this is odd, which is candidly why we started looking more at conference papers in the industry. And we ran across this Qualcomm paper, because before that, we weren't really that interested in that. So how did I feel? I felt somewhat vindicated, and I'll tell you why. When I walked away from that negotiation in 2000, I thought, well, was my gut that these weren't trustworthy people just maybe was I being too overly suspicious? Maybe I should have been more balanced. I start blaming myself. We could have had a relationship. And then I see this and I go, no, there's no question. These are not trustworthy people. And look, there's a lot of stories out there about Qualcomm we won't get into now, but people can find themselves about, I mean, they have a case back in the late 2000s where they literally roll their own law firm under the bus for withholding a bunch of information in a patent case, and literally destroyed their own law firm. I mean, it's an interesting culture.
How did Sorrell's the inventor feel?
David Sorrell,
was he ready to strangle somebody? I would be.
He was incredibly angry, because you can imagine you've got something that you believe is going to change the world. Meanwhile, we did take this technology to Qualcomm's competitors, but the reason we couldn't get traction is they weren't into where Qualcomm was going. They weren't looking to build the jet engine. They were happy with their Piper Cub. And candidly, they didn't need our technology for a Piper Cub. So I kept saying to companies like Texas Instruments, like Intel and others, guys, if you want to stay in the business, you need something like this. And they kept saying, yeah, but we're not going in that direction. I said, okay, well, if someone comes out with a solution, and by the way, 2010, Texas Instruments was forced out of the business by Qualcomm. Intel forced out of the business by Qualcomm. I can go through the whole litany. I mean, this is not a big secret. It's not my opinion.
So I want to make sure I understand this right and people watch and understand this right. People were walking around with giant clunky cell phones that couldn't connect to the internet. And it's because of all the reasons you outlined, that huge battery power, processing power, blah, blah, blah. You guys invented a super chip that basically efficiently made it so it could connect to the internet and not just suck, a shoebox worth of battery, right?
Correct.
And it did change the world, right? Because
Correct.
you walk around anywhere, everyone is, scrolling. I'm in the car with 3 crying kids, and my wife, I'm asking her, should we stop at Arby's? And she's on Instagram. She's allowed to do that because of your chip, right?
Yes.
And then Well, thank you for that, by the way. I guess better, it did change the world for
Good news, bad
better,
news,
for
Mike.
worse. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're working through it. Then a few years later, the people you tried to take this chip to end up with the exact same thing. And the world changes in their favor.
Correct.
They reap all the benefits.
Correct.
They get huge. You stay small and you don't get any of the benefits.
Correct.
They become a huge player in the national security space, almost like a sovereign state level of a company.
Yes.
And then your technology ends up in China.
That is the real irony. Now we find our technology is all over the place because they shipped it to China to get the business in China. And guess what else? Their 90% market share, no longer. It's now back into like the mid 20s from a volume standpoint. They're still a big revenue generator. But if you look at the Taiwanese and the Chinese, they now have over 50% of the volume of the smartphone chip market and other chips like for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Why? Because we, a United States behemoth, who we consider a national security asset, has taken the technology and taught them how it works to get the business, which was probably a pretty good ride for them for 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I imagine.
But then look what happens.
So riddle me this. Every politician, presidential campaign, Senate campaign, they'll say, China's ripping us off. They're stealing our technology and it's time we get smart and we stop letting them take advantage of America. Seems to me this story is not China stealing the technology. It's a so-called American company, which is not an American company, stealing a technology and then taking it and giving it to China in exchange for profit. So it's not theft, it's greed. And how do you square those things?
Mike, it's not even, it's the classic hidden in plain sight. There's an article that their CEO is being interviewed about the future of their company. And he's asked, what do you think about China and the new 5G network? And his answer is, oh, we're doubling down on China. We're going to help China have the most advanced, largest 5G network in the world.
I'm going to need these politicians to stop telling me to be mad at China when they're just coddling China the entire time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Side note, but go ahead, Jeff.
So that is. But look, the story, in my opinion, the China piece is really bad. And I think really, it certainly can at least be called betrayal. But it gets worse. People have been asking me, how is it possible this could be litigating for 16 years? I'm on my 16th year. Look, if Qualcomm isn't using our technology, they could easily show a court not using the technology. The court would put a big X through us and they'd be done.
Mm-hmm.
There is no way you can keep a litigation going for 16 years against a behemoth like that, which has unlimited legal resources, if there isn't something here. But how is it taking 16 years? Well, look, we filed our case against them in 2011. And 2 years later, we were in court. And in the process of getting ready for court, we got access to all the emails that related to our situation. And I don't even have to tell the story to a jury. The emails have it. The people who handled our litigation called me up when they got the emails and they said, Jeff, we've never seen a case where the entire story, not pieces, but the story from the time you walked in the door to the time you decided to cut the negotiations. And by the way, if you think that you were right or wrong about your suspicion about them, you were right. They were talking behind the scenes about, oh, don't tell Jeff Parker what the real value is. And, if we can't get our way, then we'll figure out other ways. The whole story is there. From the time we show them the technology, there's an email that goes, oh my gosh, this is the holy grail of wireless. This is the holy grail of RF. Then they do an analysis on our patents, and their chief technology officer says, I don't see how anybody's going to get around these patents. Then they do a business analysis and they go, my gosh, we can double our profits with this one technology alone. We have to have it. And then comes the spoiler alert. Oops, engineering, who's getting paid a lot of money to develop stuff like this, but hasn't within Qualcomm, says, don't do it. Don't do it. We can do something better. Don't pay them a penny. And so they go off for 5 years and try to do their own technology. Can't do it. And the last email that we have in this collection of emails is in 2004, where they say, well, we haven't been able to do it. We need to do something. We got to be competitive. Let's go back and look at the ParkerVision technology.
How many engineers did they throw at the problem in their big, corporate center? compared to just Sorrell's, genius guy, didn't graduate from college, figured it out on his own.
Well, we had about a dozen engineers on this, and they had, I would imagine hundreds of engineers. I mean, it's funny when you go to court against them, the first thing they tell a jury is, we're Qualcomm. We have 10,000 engineers. We own 10 gazillion patents. But you know what? It doesn't make any difference how many engineers that you have. What are they getting done? It doesn't make any difference how many patents you have. What have you invented and protected? So, for them, it's a numbers game. But the reality of it is the American dream always starts with an idea, a couple of people. In fact, I would tell you, Jeff, from my 40 years of experience in developing innovations, it's a disadvantage to have a big team. You need a little team that's hungry and that doesn't have 1,000 different voices trying to make the recipe that ends up turning out nothing. So frankly, this was the whole idea behind the patent system. How do you give the little guy who can't put bread on the table the next day if he doesn't succeed in his idea, versus Qualcomm, which is going to lumber along whether they do something new or not?
How did we go, based on your 16-year experience, from having a legal system and a patent system that was the envy of the world, as you said, traces all the way back to Article 1 of the Constitution, to now we have this nonsense where you're stuck in endless litigation to prove that you invented something that emails show you were ripped off for?
Jeff, it's sad, but I do genuinely believe the way we've gone from having the most efficient, best patent system in the world, the envy of the world, which, by the way, China has now copied. We can come back and talk about that. The best patent system in the world now may be in China.
So they copy not just our on the ground engineering technology,
Nope.
They're copying our legal technology.
Correct. For their own benefit. Anyway, how do we go from there? Again, I don't really think this is a legal conversation. It's really a conversation about principle and fraud and what do we as a country want to be. The amount of money that's being spent, Qualcomm is one of the biggest spenders in lobbying dollars. Okay, tens and tens, and I think they've spent $100 million in lobbying over the last 15 years. That's reported. Okay. Look, let me tell you a story about our case that you don't have to know anything about our technology. And I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything when I tell you this story. I'm going to just give you the facts, and I'll let your viewers put together the answers in their own mind. 2011, we file the case. 2013, we go to trial. We get a unanimous jury verdict. Qualcomm is guilty of patent infringement. And by the way, Qualcomm, you need to pay ParkerVision $173 million for having used the technology plus the future royalties. That would have added up over the life of the patents to something over $1 billion. Okay, so it's a significant patent case. That was efficient. 2 years, unanimous jury verdict. After a verdict, a judge asks the parties to file what's called post-trial motions, and you file what you think the jury did or didn't get right or wrong, or the court did or didn't get right or wrong. So we file those motions, and Qualcomm files them. We say the jury got it right. Qualcomm says the jury got it wrong. A few months after that, now we're into 2014, the judge says, you know what? I'm a long way toward entering the final order and finishing this case. Come back to my courtroom for a day. Argue why you think the jury did or didn't get it right. I want to get this order finished. So we go back for a full day and we argue back and forth. This is the American legal system. This is great. At the end of the day, you know what the judge says? Number one, there is certainly going to be an ongoing royalty here. I need you guys to get together, figure out what that is, make my job easy, and tell me how you're going to track the infringing products. We walk out of that courthouse thinking,
We did it.
we did it.
Mm-hmm.
The system works.
Justice. Truth
Justice.
the American way.
We had investors in the company. Literally, they were wanting to do cartwheels down the street. Okay.
Some athletic investors.
Hey. So we are excited and thinking, let's go on with our life. Let's keep inventing and
Mhm.
bringing new things to market. Except for 6 weeks after that event, the judge did enter his final order. He reverses the jury verdict and throws the case out. Now, you might say,
Can-
huh,
Can you boil down into just two sentences, why it is the judge thinks that this was not something the jury got right. I mean, that to have a trial, to, you know, to have first committed it to the jury,
Yeah.
when I'm sure there was legal briefing preceding that, you know, that's a lot of wasted time. And for a judge to throw out, you know, ordinary Americans who come together, they invest their time, they give, you know, their civic duty to understanding something that's kind of complicated. And then you're like, never mind. I'm just going to impose an answer on this. Like what was the like quick, you know, elevator concept of like why it is he thought the jury got it wrong?
Candidly, Jeff, it was bizarre. Here's what happened. Before you go to a trial, sometimes the judge will look at the patent claims and decide that some of those terms in the claims need to be further defined, that the words aren't self-explanatory. And before we ever went to trial, Qualcomm said to the judge, you know, the way these claims are written, these claims say that there's a device called a capacitor, which is basically just a storage bucket. Think of it as a place you pour water in, it can store the water and you can pour it out, okay? These claims say the capacitors down convert. And we thought that was a strange ask, but later we understood why they asked. And I'll get to that. But the judge turned them down. He said, I've looked at the patents, I've looked at the claims. They don't support capacitors down converting. In fact, these claims use switches to down convert. And again, I'm going to put out a video soon. Everybody who's watching this can go look at that video, and it's a very nice explanation of how our technology works. But just suffice to say that by operating a switch,
Just, you know, for the layperson, because I do have some understanding of that at this point.
Yep.
So down conversion is basically there's radio waves floating around,
right?
and they have to be translated into
Yep.
something that the computer can essentially
They
understand.
have to be slowed down. They're too fast. What gets you a radio wave to go from point A to point B is great, but it's so fast you can't really get the data. So you got to slow it. Think of it as a horse race, and you want to see who's the first nose across the finish line. So you take click, 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 snap, 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 and you go back and look at the pictures.
It's a photo finish.
It's a photo finish.
Yeah.
Same thing. You're slowing down the race by looking at those snapshots. We're slowing down the radio signal by sampling it with a switch. Okay, it's clear as a bell in the patents. Anyway, Qualcomm tried to convince them that's not what's happening in our patents. It's something else. It's a capacitor, which is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. It's not taught in the patents. It's physically impossible. Anyway, after the jury trial, and here we are in these post-trial argument, Qualcomm is saying these patents stand for that, and we don't use their technology because we use switches.
So they just changed the word of what the thing was called.
Yeah, basically he did a definition of the patents after the fact.
Okay. After
Okay.
the jury had already figured
Yes.
this out, understood it, and was like,
Yes.
yeah, this is plain as day.
Yes, correct.
That's contradicted by what the patents say.
And by the laws of physics in this universe.
It's like not being able to define what a woman is in court. They're just playing with the terms. But
We have
case.
an upcoming podcast about that.
No, it is exactly like that. It is like saying, I pour water into a bucket and the bucket turns it into Coca-Cola.
Hell of a bucket.
Be a hell of a bucket, be a good business plan, you know? But the problem is all a bucket does is store what you put in it. And so, yes, we do have a capacitor in our circuit. It just stores what's been down converted. And we won't go into the details. As I say, well, there'll be a video that'll explain all this, but that's how we lost the first case. Now, here's what's interesting. When we saw this crazy argument, my attorneys came to me and said, look, we've won. The judge has told you to go off and negotiate an ongoing royalty, but we see that Qualcomm has used so many other of your patents. Let's file a second case right away so that when they sit down and negotiate to take out a license, because that's what they're going to do, you can show them we've got you here, 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 every which way you can imagine. And so we filed a second case while we still had won the case, just as a placeholder for negotiation. Well, when the judge now redefines these patents, it turns out there's some patents that we had filed in the second case. And guess what the patent claim says explicitly? This switch down converts. And there is no misinterpreting that. There is no way to change that. And now Qualcomm is toast because they've represented all of our products use these switches to down convert. And we're like, yeah, that's covered right here in these patents. That case is on its 14th year. How did we get in the first case to trial in 2 years? And now we're in 14 years to the next case.
It's to use the word patently offensive, that like the system could take a couple decades versus the speed of innovation. And when you look at like the way that works, no wonder America doesn't invent great things anymore. Like, what are the great inventions of the last few years? Just like different cell phone apps and QR codes and like ways to play with cats on your phone or meet girls on the internet.
I'm only going to talk facts.
Mhm.
So let me fill in a few more facts for you and your audience. So I tell you that we have a post-trial hearing. The judge says go negotiate an ongoing royalty. I don't think it's an unreasonable assessment to think he meant that we were going to win. Okay.
Mhm.
And then 6 weeks later, he changes his mind and throws us out. Well, let me tell you about some factual things that happened between go off and negotiate an ongoing royalty and 6 weeks later.
Mhm.
We have a product that we use in our company called Leadlander. We still use it to this day. It's a third-party service that tracks every visitor to your website. And it shows you who came, how long they were on, what pages did they look at, where's the computer located. So every morning I would look at my Leadlander, and you kind of can imagine on a case against Qualcomm, a big company, we had lots of visitors to our website who were watching the trial and things that were going on. So I always found it interesting. Oh, here's 22 banking firms who looked. Oh, here's 5 technology companies, blah, blah, blah.
Here's a media firm.
Yeah, here's media firms. I mean, that was the normal kind of thing. About 2 weeks, middle of the month of May, May 1st was our hearing, middle of May, I come in and I look at my Leadlander report for the day, and I'm going through and I see, oh, Qualcomm visited once. Qualcomm visited a second time. Qualcomm visited a third time. That wasn't unusual. They visited our website a lot. And then I see, oh, look at this, Executive Office of the President of the United States,
And who was the president then?
Barack Obama. So I stop and I look at that and I go, whoa, what is the White House doing looking at my website? And what did they look at? Well, if you looked at our website back then, we had biographies, products, technologies, all kinds of neat things to look at. They didn't look at any of that. They only looked at one thing: patent litigation against Qualcomm. That's all they looked at. And by the way, according to the Leadlander report, the computer is located in the West Wing of the White House. Now, at that moment, to be candid with you, I thought, okay, maybe it's interesting because it's a big patent case, blah, blah, blah. I didn't really think anything beyond that at that moment. This is middle of May. Now we're at the middle of June, and the jury verdict has been reversed. And needless to say, that Leadlander visit is the first thing that comes to my mind. So what do? Right after the jury verdict is reversed, and by the way, I picked myself up off the floor, I go on Google and I put in President Obama, Qualcomm. And up pops a story just like that. And it says, oh, on May 9th or something like that, middle of May, the CEO and co-founder of Qualcomm hosts President Obama for a fundraiser for the DNC at his home in San Diego, about a week before the visit to my website. And then I do a little deeper and I go, is there any history between the president and the CEO of Qualcomm? Well, yeah, he's one of his top campaign supporters for president and has been a supporter all the way back to when he was a state senator in Illinois. And I'm looking at this and
Wait, when he was a state senator?
Yeah.
Before he was even on the national map.
Correct.
That is suspicious.
Well, again, I said to you,
Especially because this is a stage at which Qualcomm's already become a behemoth, right?
yes.
And there's a lot of us out there that think Obama might have been, selected or groomed in a certain way.
Well, then I do a little more research and I say Qualcomm has a big lobbying effort and they spend a lot of money.
Mhm.
Who is it that they lobby with? Oh, the Covington law firm is one of their top lobbying firms. And then I say, who at Covington might have a relationship with the current White House? Well, it turns out that the Attorney General of the United States,
Yep.
a guy named Eric Holder, had come out of Covington to become our Attorney General, by the way, and he went back to Covington, where he is to this day, as within that law firm. But here's what's interesting. A little later down the road, I do another search on our lead lander and I start to wonder, has anybody from the Department of Justice ever visited our website? And the answer is 34 or 35 visits.
And they're not a party to your case at all.
They're
Yeah.
not a party to our case. And what's most interesting is about half the time the Department of Justice visits, on the same day, looking at the same number of pages, guess who else visits? Qualcomm.
Right.
Huh, interesting. Now, I said I'm not going to accuse anybody of anything, and I'm not, but here's the facts. Go off and negotiate an ongoing royalty. Fundraiser in California at the CEO's home with the president. Visit to ParkerVision's website. Ah, just kidding about the ongoing royalty, guys. We're reversing the jury verdict and throwing the case out. And oh, by the way, DOJ, 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 all the way up until, frankly, about the year 2022, visiting our website with Qualcomm on the same day, looking at the same number of pages. We have a case right now, our second case against Qualcomm. By the way, different judge, same courthouse. When we filed that second case, it went to a different judge. Qualcomm insisted they move it to the first judge. And the second judge, who's a new judge at the time, said, nope, I think it's interesting. I want to keep the case. We said, great. That judge, that case took a long time to develop to get to trial. I won't go into all the reasons why, but a lot of reasons. 2022, after the pandemic ended, we were just a few months from trial when the judge called for a pretrial conference. So it took us a long time from 2014 to finally get to trial in 2022, but we were there on the doorstep. And at that pretrial conference, the judge asked Qualcomm, hey, let's go through the motions that you have for pretrial and ParkerVision. Make a long story short, the judge ruled against us on every single motion, such that there was nothing left to try, and canceled the jury trial. Now, here's what's interesting about it. We appealed him and we got him reversed. And everything we asked for was reversed and sent back in 2024. And guess what happened?
Yeah, there was probably a more restrained, jig being danced by the investors at that point, I assume.
Oh, our investors have been so beaten up on this, Jeff. I mean, it's really a
They're like,
testimony.
okay, we'll wait and see. Let's see how this turns out.
Listen, they've continued in spite of the fact that it looks like they're throwing good money after bad based on how the system is treating us. They've continued to help support this company. And candidly, I personally have put in everything I have to put into this company. So we end up getting sent back down for a trial by the appellate court in 2024. And make a long story short, this judge decides, you know what? Appellate court's not right. I'm right. And he reverses basically the reversal. And now we're back again at the appellate court, almost on bended knee, saying, please help us.
So look, we have, Jeff, the fact that you've had this Jarndyce v. Jarndyce kind of trial that's going on in multiple proceedings for 16 years on multiple patents. And you're saying that, the problem doesn't seem to be in the legal system of the adjudication of the patent. There must be a meta problem, must be a bigger problem. Are you taking any steps to try to figure out what that meta problem is, Jeff?
So that's a great question. And the answer is yes. As I said, I'm going to only give you guys the facts and not put together any conclusions from that. So we'd like to be able to put together more conclusions, but we need some help in doing that. And so we've actually filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and we've had very narrowly tailored questions. And let me tell you where we are with that so far. So late December of this year, we filed a request with the National Archives. And we said to the National Archives, we have 4 things we're interested in right now. Number 1, are there any documents in the Obama library? So we filed with the National Archives, we'll call them NARA, and we asked 4 things. Number 1, are there any documents in your archives that indicate whose computer, because we have the computer address, visited our website after the fundraiser? And we gave it the date, we gave it the IP address. And question number 2, are there any documents that indicate that the person who had that computer was on Air Force One going to and from the fundraiser? And number three, are there any documents between the White House and the Department of Justice that have the words ParkerVision, Jeff Parker, I don't remember all the terms, but very narrowly tailored to just us. And then last but not least, are there any documents between the White House and anybody? Same terms. And within a couple weeks, National Archives gave us a response. And they said, actually, question number one, we've got, yeah, about 40 or 50 documents that indicate whose computer that is. Question number two, yeah, we've got about 60 or 70 documents that indicate who that person is as it relates to being registered on the Air Force One flight to and from that fundraiser. Question number three, we have about 1,000 documents that have those keywords in them. Now, what would the White House be sending to DOJ documents, emails, communications that deal with the name Jeff Parker, ParkerVision, patent case in Middle District of Florida, whatever. I don't remember the exact terms, but they were just relegated to us. And by the way, the fourth question, White House to anybody, has, again, about 1,000 responsive documents. So we are now wanting to get those documents.
We got to get those documents. We're going to help you get those documents. I imagine if President Trump hears this or his team, I mean, what a story here. You got Obama, a major company, Eric Holder screwing over a everyday American, an innovator here. Like, this is red meat central mass for the whole theory of like the rise of President Trump, draining the swamp, the corruption
Mike,
against China. Like, what variable is missing from this story?
I'm trying to do all the heavy lifting. Just get me the documents, because guess what, Mike and Jeff? If there's no there, so be it.
Right.
But it is very interesting that there would be this many responsive documents. Who was the computer user? Who was on Air Force One that used that computer? There's documents. Just that alone should be interesting to us. What was the communication between the White House and either DOJ or anybody else that would have the name Jeff Parker? Now, maybe there's more than one Jeff Parker out there, but come on, let's see the documents.
Let me do a little bit of testifying here for you, Jeff, as the one among the three of us who's worked in the executive office of the president.
Okay.
So, and my job in the executive office of the president, as contrasted with my job in Trump 45 at the Justice Department, was sometimes to interact with litigation, but mostly to focus on rulemakings. But I can tell you that I can't think of staffers, like I would have many meetings, people would be entirely oblivious to litigation. The idea that you would get this much high level attention from people in the West Wing, people who get on Air Force One, visiting your website in close timing proximity to Qualcomm visiting your website is highly suspicious.
Look, let me give you one last thing that I would like to share with you guys that is really sad. Early in the litigation, we continued to keep our engineers working. We continued to do research and development. Eventually, we had to turn those labs off and let people go, which is really sad. People I'd worked with for 20, 30 years. We've spent so many dollars, tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars in litigation. If you add up what it costs just to keep our company afloat, plus the cost of litigation, maybe we spent $100 million, okay? But we had invented the next generation of the technology, which is sitting on the shelf now for a number of years. This technology removes over half the power consumption in running a 5G network. Okay? One of the problems with 5G is it's too power hungry. So we all have 5G on our mobile phones, but it's not real 5G. It's marketing 5G, okay? It's not much faster and much more exciting than the 4G that we had before it. And that's because we have a problem in the network. It's too power consuming. The forecast is that the 5G network will ultimately consume 20% of the entire electrical production of the world. Now, meanwhile, we have data centers that are being built left and right, and they are threatening to consume about the same amount. So there's not enough power. This is a technology that will keep America in the forefront. It is a national security must-have. And guess what? I can't take it off the shelf.
Why not?
Because this government has shown me I can't protect my patents. I have no efficient way of protecting the patents. There's nobody who's willing to take a look at a situation like this and say, we've got guardrails in this country. We're not going to let this kind of thing occur. So I basically said, look, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. I'm not going to do this for 20 more years on my next generation technology. Do I want to get it off the shelf and get it into market? Yes. But how do you do that in an environment like this? This is a dialogue that should be happening at the highest levels today.
The intellectual property clause of the Constitution, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, its purpose is to ensure that new inventions will occur, they'll be promoted, that people will be incentivized to make them, and that they'll be able to keep the profits from it. But what you're just describing is you have an amazing next generation invention, and the legal system counterproductively turned on its head is incentivizing you not to bring that to
And
market.
I can assure you, Jeff, I am not the only one in this country who feels that way. I assure you, I am the tip of a very big iceberg. I'm not sowing the seeds of my destruction down the road as an American.
Right.
But unfortunately, we see too much of that today. And people like me are getting a little long in the tooth in fighting this battle without getting support.
All right. Well, I mean, look, to just make a homely analogy about it, right? In olden days, it would be like someone invented a new plow, but they're afraid to take it out of their barn because if someone sees it, then it will get stolen.
Right.
I mean, that's essentially what you're saying.
Right.
Like my first major invention that was ready to bring to market, I negotiated, I showed it to my neighbors so that they could use their wherewithal to get it, throughout the entire market. They stole it. And now, so why am I going to try to do that again? Am I going to be, kicked in the head twice?
100%. And Jeff, what the Qualcomms of the world have convinced the government leadership of is these next big things, we got it. They come from us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They don't come from little companies like ParkerVision, which is completely untrue. Of course, large, big companies sometimes have revolutionary technologies, but if you look by and large, where do the next big things come? Look at Qualcomm wasn't much bigger than ParkerVision when we met up with them in the late 90s. Okay. In fact, one of the things they kept enticing me with is, you know who you remind us a lot of? Us. Let's do business together. I was all for it until I came to realize their culture was not a let's partner together, 1 + 1 = 2. It was like 1 + 0 = 1, and we're the one. Okay. So there's no question that this is harming the future. The thing I would tell anybody who's watching this today is what you see happening today is a silent war. It's the most dangerous war. We all know wars when bombs drop and things get blown up. Those are easy to see. The news can come in and we can all talk about that. We are fighting a war today that's quiet, behind the scenes, down deep, that people don't even know about. And let me tell you, that war is going to become the noisy war when people like China have the next generation technology before we do. They're hidden in plain sight also. They have their 50-year plan. They've communicated they are the next world leader. We've been around for 5,000 years. Time for us to be the world leader, not the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They're not shy to say that. And yet we have companies and people in the United States who think it's totally fine to help them to that aspiration, to make a few dollars. Come on, how many yachts can you buy? How many oceanfront homes can you live in? It's outrageous.
It's kind of karmic at some level, right? The folks who ripped off your technology, they got their technology ripped off by China. And
Yep.
if the legal system had actually protected your patent the way it should have, then it would have rested at some level, ultimately really in your hands, and you wouldn't have shared it. And if they'd come to you for a licensing agreement to say, well, we're going to take this to China too, you could have probably said no.
Right.
I want this technology to benefit America. Was that the approach of ParkerVision?
We listen, we were very open to a license. By the way, Qualcomm's most profitable business is licensing. Qualcomm depends on their patents, okay, to have a profitable company.
Mm-hmm.
It is ironic, to say the least, at how they've perverted the very system that they rely on, but they do it through lobbying dollars.
Not only has the patent system been turned on its head in your case, the national security interests are turned on their head because this has all benefited China, which doesn't benefit the U.S.
No, by the way, Qualcomm's been investing not just in wireless training for Chinese. Go read about it. It's out there. They've also now started to invest in startup AI companies in China. What are we doing?
So these things could actually be military connected kind of technologies. And
Mike, it does not give me any pleasure to think that the wireless communications probably in today's Chinese drones are based on ParkerVision's technology. Okay. Our technology is so elegant in how you can create and receive wireless communications. It is almost a certainty that this technology that Qualcomm took there is in all kinds of Chinese military applications, 100%.
so what are they, how much money did you say they spent on lobbying and what was the time frame?
I don't know how much Qualcomm has spent, but I'm guessing it has to be over $100 million.
That is an obscene number. And just like, let's think for a second. What do you spend $100 million on if not buying politicians off? What are, and I've worked on Capitol Hill and like these big tech companies, these favored sons of the government, which always come in with the implication that they're attached to the intelligence community or the military, and any adverse move against this private interest company, who's also happens to be working with China, is anti-American in effect. And so, you know, if you're at our reception, which we're hosting, and there's a big dinner and there's wine, like Qualcomm equals America, America equals Qualcomm, but it's really Chicom if you stop and think about it. But like, what does the money go towards? Why? There's a fundraiser for Barack Obama. There's $100 million spent on people on Capitol Hill. You have a congresswoman, I understand it right now, who's like the daughter of a Qualcomm executive or something.
Well, the granddaughter of the co-founder was funded to become a congresswoman.
Right. And this Sarah Jacobs is her name.
Correct.
This is one for all of you who saw the hearing. By the time this is up, it'll be last week. Marco Rubio was testifying, and she kind of just went for the TikTok moment and started making fun of his shoes and things.
Yes.
And Secretary of State Rubio gave her the business.
Yes.
But I wonder if he knows the full story of what this is, because Qualcomm, again, if you're in the swamp of DC, which we're supposed to be draining, by the way, I want to see it drained. That's what you were told over and over and over again. And I think we've just gotten too comfortable with the fact that this whole system is bought and paid for. And right now you see a dangerous moment also where the Democrat Party, and obviously I'm a conservative guy, is going to have that be their mantra going into the next presidential election. You look at this John Ossoff character, senator down in Georgia, and his campaign is going to be an indictment of special interests controlling the system. And so like, it's about time we get our politicians' heads around these things, that just because these companies are, you know, donating to whatever fund you have set up or whatever politicians you like, does not mean they have your best interest or the country's best interest at heart. And they're making a lot of people out to be fools, honestly.
Look,
like all these congressmen saying they're tough on China, bull.
Look, if our political leadership on both sides of the aisle genuinely wants to make a country for the American citizens that works for everybody, great. Help us get our FOIA filled.
Yeah.
Get us. Let's see what's in those documents.
Also, why do we even need help? And I'm sorry, I'm ranting here, but it's your government. It's our government. That's why we have our tagline, it's your government. Like, these documents belong to everybody. They are government documents. This notion that you have to beg for it, you have to ask, you have to potentially sue. It's just another example of the system being turned on its head against the everyday man. I have no doubt if Qualcomm wanted a document,
just like
that document would be there.
Yeah.
You call the president's wingman, Eric Holder. Like, this is just... The rich get richer, the more powerful keep their power. And it's like, when is the fever going to break? And I hope it breaks before the bombs start going off from China. I can't speak Mandarin, Jeff. I'm not learning.
Yeah. Well, look, we will have done it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's not too late to right the ship. And I've believed in the American dream since the time I was a child. I still believe in the American dream. But I have to say, the last 16 years of experience have made it a little bit more challenging. And I sure as heck hope we can get the information we've asked for, because if there's no there, I'll sleep better at night. Okay, this whole thing was just a big misunderstanding. Seems like there will probably be something there of interest.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope somebody's telling President Trump, you know, Qualcomm was on Air Force One on this big China trip. And like, we're starting to get a little bit uncomfortable here with these huge business executives that aren't, you know, do not share the central theme of the non-controversial aspects of America first, like, which is, let's put America first and not have China eat our lunch. And you have, well, I'll call them Chicom for the purposes of this, like on the plane to negotiate with China. Like, what sense does that make?
Mike, listen, I assure you that if the president were to ask Qualcomm, what is this? I hear you've got engineering facilities in China. He might hear from them, well, everybody does.
Right.
Let me tell you the difference. Okay. I assure you, Intel, Apple, other companies, they have engineering facilities to show people how to apply their products. That's a different conversation than I'm going to teach you how to make my chips. Okay. I'm not going to ship you a finished meal. I'll teach you how to make the meal. What do you think the Chinese are going to do?
Right.
Okay. And, when I continue to see, even with President Trump in office, the continued investment outside of the United States in fundamental investment of where we're going to develop the next generation technologies and ideas, it's not going to take us to a good place. We're not going to be able to control where that goes,
Oh.
how it's used, including being used against us.
Yep.
And the one thing about technology, it only is going to be developed faster and it's going to be more powerful. So this is not the time for us to take this lightly. This is the time for us to right this ship and listen, we've started to bring back the semiconductor. When I first got into semiconductors in 1980, most of it, like almost all of it, was built here in the United States. And then we foolishly gave it away.
Yep.
And that's a whole nother conversation for a different day. But we have thankfully started bringing it back. You will not have a successful semiconductor industry in the United States without also having the ecosystem to develop the technologies that go on those semiconductors. Those are the ParkerVisions of the world.
Right.
Okay. You've got NVIDIA just announced a week or two ago in Taiwan. They're making $125, $150 billion investment in Taiwan. Do you know why? Because they said, we got to get our products out quick. The semiconductor ecosystem is there. It's not just manufacturing, guys. If you look at who has the largest number of semiconductor engineers now, it's no longer the United States. You have to bring back the whole thing. We can do it. It's not too late.
Right.
We can still win the race.
Good.
But we've got to be bringing it back, and we cannot let these big tech companies say flowery, nice things.
Mm-hmm.
Watch their feet, not their mouth.
Right. See them show up, Johnny come lately, like at the, inauguration all of a sudden with checkbooks out. And it's like, I remember where you guys were at a couple of years ago. And Qualcomm, like, I remember, you're donating, having massive fundraisers for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton, I think, was one of their big puppets. But like at the time where they were framing President Trump too. And like those fires, I know they still burn. They burn for me. I'm sure they burn for President Trump. Of course they do. But like his team who has to think about the motivations of these people who are getting rich. Because like what I fear, to sum up what you just said, kind of as my limited interpretation of it, is like, yeah, we can't build stuff here. Like, or we don't build stuff. We should build stuff, and we could build stuff here.
Yes.
We have to commit to actually doing it. But even scarier than that is this notion that we can't create ideas here. Like our intellectual capital can't even be enough. And we could end up in this world where there's just data centers everywhere, a few tech companies controlling them and the AI that they feed into, and then some very wealthy investors who paid for the data centers. And you're going to have this like stratified, like very top bottom kind of America. And if you want to disrupt that, if you have a bright idea, if you want to build something, you don't want to just eat AI slop all day and, be around data centers, which doesn't sound too pleasant. I'm not knocking them entirely. No, you need power, but like you can't even disrupt that. And that doesn't sound too American or to me.
Mike, let's go back to fundamentals. I told you at the beginning of this conversation, I've lived the American dream and now the American nightmare.
Yeah.
When I lived the American dream, I had a company that partnered up with the largest heating air conditioning manufacturer in the world, Carrier Corporation. They were owned by United Technologies, even bigger. Guess what? We worked together. 1 + 1 equaled a lot more than 2. Eventually, they wanted to purchase my company and we sold it.
Mm-hmm.
I did a second company. We did television broadcast studio automation. Guess what? We did about half the newsrooms, and I was approached by Thomson, an electronics company from France. They wanted to get into that business. They had other equipment in that business. We worked together. What I'm telling you is, under the rules where everybody's playing by the same level playing field, there's a reason why companies will work together.
Right.
When you buy the system and you corrupt the system, and that's what's happened here. What has occurred in the last 10, 20 years is these mammoth companies have convinced government leadership. Only we don't need those little guys. Only we.
Right.
Don't believe those guys. And I mean, they've perverted the patent system. They've perverted antitrust law. I could go on and on, but I can tell you, the notion of small companies and large companies is not existing like it used to when I was in the business
Did they ever lose? Does Qualcomm ever lose?
in terms of
In court on like big things that you need the government for?
not that I have seen. The only
That's
time,
nice.
Mike, that I saw them lose is when they were caught red-handed against the case against Broadcom, hiding evidence.
Yeah.
And when the judge found that, he went berserk. He threw the book at him. But Qualcomm, who had never told their legal team that they were hiding the evidence,
Threw them under the bus.
the judge went after the legal
Of
team.
course.
The law firm went out of business. Some of them, I think, even lost their law licenses. It was horrible. 7, 8 years later, too late for those lawyers' career,
Oh, yeah.
an appellate court allowed them to break privilege, and it was found that Qualcomm actually withheld the evidence. You know what Qualcomm got? A little slap. This is the problem.
We can't let America slide into a, techno-feudalist system, or to me, that then quickly slides into a techno-fascist system. We have to have an American system that is open politically, open economically, and those two things are tied together. If one gets perverted, then it leads to a growth and an incrustation of political power that then makes it impossible to actually have any economic upstarts. It's a vicious circle.
Look, I agree with you completely. We are the world leader for the reason you just described when the system works. But it's got to work for everybody. And it's what's really sad about this, I guess this will be my final word, is I think about if Qualcomm had played it straight, where would we be today? Well, ParkerVision would be thriving. And guess what? Qualcomm would even be more thriving. Now, they would not believe this. They'll hear this and they'll roll their eyes. But let me tell you something. You know how much they've advanced the technology they stole from us since they've been using it? Because we track all their products. Zero.
Huh.
It's been a copy and repeat exercise. Okay. Meanwhile, we've advanced it. We can make it do wonderful things. They haven't done that. They would have actually been better off. Now what they're doing is they're competing against the product that they've taught the Chinese. They're losing market share because they have the same thing that the Chinese have. And I just look at this and I just shake my head and I go, it's so short-sighted and it's so greedy. Why? So that's thank you for having me in today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Jeff, you got me riled up. Oversight Project hates seeing people get so blatantly screwed like this. So let's help you out. Let's
Thank
do
you.
what we can do. At least, take some swings at the system here. I mean, it's got to work. That's the promise of this political moment we're into.
Right.
It's drain the swamp, end the weaponization, get America back on track. Not going to let China eat our lunch. Not going to let these special interest insiders, help them along the way while the fat cats just get away with everything.
Mike, when I looked up you guys and I read about what you guys are doing, I thought this is the organization that I'm going to go to because we've got to expose this.
Yes, that's what we do.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff.